Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another installment of California saltwater fishing. Today we are joining the Some Fun on a 3/4 day trip out of Dana Harbor. As we were heading out, we were greeted by a beautiful sunrise coming out of the east with flat ocean conditions, almost perfect glassy conditions because of zero wind and maybe a 1 foot swell. So almost Lake Pacific type of conditions out there greeted us. Pretty much the best sort of scenario that you could wish for on any trip, whether that's a 3/4, half day, full day, or what have you. We headed south towards San Onofre, going into some deeper water where the sculpin tend to dwell. One thing to keep in mind about sculpin that people often bring up about these fish, and a reason why they're often called the California scorpion fish, is because they have venom in their dorsal, pelvic, and anal spines. So always be very careful when handling these fish. The opinion varies on how severe the sting can be. I've heard some people say it's not so bad, a little bit more than a bee sting. Well, I've heard others say that it is completely debilitating and you wish that you were never born. So probably the answer is somewhere in between. Although in my whole life of fishing, which has been since I was about 5 or 6 years old, I've never gotten poked by one of these things, knock on wood, and I hope never to get poked, so I hope to honestly never see what it is like for myself. So as you can see there, one came up over the rail using a Berkeley Gulp chartreuse colored grub tail, and the chartreuse color seemed to be working pretty well today, as well as some red colored jigs or reddish brown seem to be working pretty well overall. In terms of the jigs that I was seeing the fish coming up on, not sure if color really matters or if it's more of the motion, but seemed to work for me. I was using lighter gear for the most part. I had one conventional reel with about 20-pound test and a couple of spinning rods in the 20-pound class as well. I brought the spinning rods with me because my boys were joining me on my trip, and they are not incredibly well versed on the conventional reel, and I know that sometimes that can be frustrating for people who are still learning fishing because of backlash and bird's nests, etc. However, I was happy that one of my sons did become more comfortable with the conventional reel and saw the versatility in using it versus a spinning rod. And there you can see one of my sons there in the mask. He actually was sleeping most of the early part of the trip and woke up right as I got into a tangle. So I figured, why not set him up, get him in the water, and I needed a deckhand to come over and help us with the tangle. And as I go to find the deckhand, we can get a nice view of the boat going around to the starboard side. There were 30 anglers, I believe, on this trip, so it was a pretty full boat for the size of the boat. But luckily, since we were fishing at anchor, we could fish on both sides of the boat. And for the most part, most folks were pretty nice and easy to work with. And tangles happen. That's something that's just going to occur on any boat that you're on. Even if you're with the most experienced of folks, they're still going to happen. Even in perfect conditions like this, tangles are still going to occur. We were just very lucky that we had great deckhands like Greg over here, who came over and were able to assist us in getting detangled. And while he was helping us with getting detangled, I got my son in the water and set him up on this spinning gear and had him, try his luck and see if he could catch a fish while we were trying to work things out. I will say that in all of my trips out of Dana Point, the deckhands of the Some Fun have been some of the best that I've had the pleasure of working with. As you can see here, Greg is taking his time to make sure that he doesn't need to cut any line if he doesn't have to, and get out a pretty nasty tangle that involved me and two of the ladies that were along the rail. So he was doing a great job of that, and while he was working that out for me and I wasn't able to get my pole back in the water, I was just making sure that my son was well taken care of as I see him off there on the left side hooking into his first fish of the day. So one thing when you are fishing with your kids, always keep an eye on them. Don't just kind of leave them to their own devices. Even if they may have had some experience on the water, they always appreciate a helping hand from dad or mom when things get a little bit tough and a little bit interesting. Be there to spot them and make sure that they aren't in over their head and that they're physically able to handle the situation. My son is 14 years old and he's wanting to do it for himself, so I was just there to kind of spot him at the rail and make sure that he was doing a nice, even retrieve as he was pulling up his first sculpin of the day. And I was pretty happy for him since he just woke up and just got out on the deck. And it's always a good thing and very encouraging for the kids as soon as they get out on the deck to hook in with a nice fish. And as you can see in just a minute here as it comes over the rail, that it was actually a keeper and a pretty nice sculpin for him to start the day off with. And as I mentioned before, be very careful when handling these fish and make sure that if you are with your kids that they're very well aware that they need to exercise a great amount of caution when dealing with sculpin in particular because of the venom in their spines, and you don't want to ruin their day just by them getting accidentally poked by one of these things, or ruin your day either by getting poked. As you can see, those spines are pretty nasty and can make pretty good work of you. And there's our good friend Cool Hand Luke, who's one of the founders of the Real Disciples Fishing Club, a guy that I go out with often and have the pleasure of fishing with, one of the best guys to have on the rail next to you as he's pulling in another, not keeper sculpin, but pretty much consistent with the quality we were seeing that day. I'd say for every keeper, each person was probably pulling up about 10 shorts that had to go back overboard. The short ones can stick you just as bad as the big ones can, if not worse. So exercise the same amount of caution that you would on a 3-inch fish with a 12-inch fish, because either one of them can stick you in a pretty nasty way. So always exercise caution and use a lot of respect when dealing with these fish. So there's Luke with a nice even retrieve, bringing up his sculpin. Yep, and there it goes over the rail. And as I said, that was pretty consistent with the quality of fish that we were seeing for a majority of the day. And if you're thinking of taking your kids out on a trip, don't be hesitant to take them on a sculpin trip with you just because of the danger that they might get poked. Believe me, if you exercise enough caution and you're careful when working with these fish, you should be pretty safe. And sculpin fishing is a lot of fun for the kids because it is pretty consistent action since these fish are relatively aggressive, and as long as you place the bait relatively near them and it's something that they're looking for, they'll tend to take the hook. And of course, yeah, you're going to have to be careful with them, as I am here with this guy. I could see he was just lightly hooked, so I just kind of gently bent the hook over and gave it a little shake, and he fell right off. In this case, they bit a Berkeley ghost shrimp with a little bit of anchovy pinned onto the tip. It always helps to put a little bit of bait on there, but you want to be careful not to use just squid or just tiny bits of bait on a bare hook, because you may end up catching some rockfish, which during the months of January and February, at least for the southern fishing district of California, are off limits. And me and the boys had a great time trading off rods and pulling one up and then dropping another down, and it was pretty consistent action on these short sculpin. And my younger son Connor actually did a pretty good job and was able to pull up one of the bigger sculpin of the day, as you can see there as he proudly holds it as close to the camera as possible to make it look as big as possible. It was a good 12-inch fish and nice and solid, big round belly to it, and he couldn't have been happier, being one of the bigger fish of the boat that day. And he was pretty proud of his catch and was able to take some nice fillets home to his mom and impress her with his catch for the day. And I have to say, in terms of eating fish, sculpin is one of the better fish in the sea. It is kind of similar to rockfish, although it is slightly firmer, but keep in mind that the fillets are kind of smaller. Most of this fish is taken up by its enormous head, as you can see, but the fillets come out and they're nice, clean, perfectly white meat, and they're some of the better tasting fish that you can get out there. Personally, I like cooking up these fish with a light beer batter sort of recipe, but I know some folks just steam them, or some people just go ahead and bake the whole fish after they scale it and gut and gill it. And here the deckhands are doing a great job of cleaning our catch on the way back, and I'd have to say this was a fantastic trip. my boys had a good time, and they said it was probably the best trip that they've been on. So as I said, I do recommend these 3/4 day trips for your kids, because you're typically able to get out to places that are a little further out, that tend to hold a bit better quality of fish and a bit more of a consistent bite. Yeah, they might not be able to take home everything that they catch, but at least they see some colorful stuff along the way, and they can tend to have a better trip and a better experience overall. So, with all of that in mind, I'd like to say, as always, I appreciate everybody who's subscribed and likes these videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And please, of course, tell your friends and let me know other types of videos or topics that you'd like to have discussed. I'm going to be going out on the Fury next month in March, so hopefully we'll get some good video from that. But who knows if I don't catch a trip in between now and then, but definitely the Fury's coming up. So until then, my friends, keep those lines tight and enjoy your time on the water. Stay safe and be happy. Have a good one.